Hello, this is Shauna Stefanchik, President of Step Up Consulting, and this video is over the curriculum management tool specifically for those of you working on social studies. So if you're watching this video, you are most likely have your management tools open, and so please watch this first to give some examples and some ideas to think through before working on your management system. So I'm going to skip this slide. If you have our tools, you're probably already familiar with who I am and my history, but all you need to know is over the decades of years as an administrator and teacher myself and now consultant, the goal is that this management tool will offer you a different experience of curriculum, one that is not as time intensive and arduous. You may not believe me now, but hopefully we win you in the process of doing this. So today our main goals for this video are to help you create a pacing guide aligned to the priority standards. We probably have, unless you have someone from your district who's leading this work, they will have a work time and giving feedback to you and then debrief next steps at the end. So if you're watching this video and you're facilitating, you might give time to pause the video at this point and do some introductions. After everyone in the room is familiar with everyone, I'll just go over curriculum development and this process in general, that we want to make sure that we have pacing guides that cover all of the DESE priority standards. We're going to pace those. Once they are paced and in the management tool that you have before you, you can begin looking at assessments, which ultimately would impact your grade cards, because what you are assessing and holding important should also be those things that you are reporting on your grade card. So this is just an overview of the journey of this work and what it could look like as a whole. So why are we doing this today? First, we need to start with the question, what is a guaranteed curriculum? I'm sure all of you are familiar with Robert Marzano, an influential researcher, and he says one of the most pivotal things of any school is to have a guaranteed and viable curriculum. So at this time, I would like you to take a few moments and turn to someone next to you. What is a guaranteed curriculum? Since I'm not there with you, I can't hear the responses, but I am going to share with you Marzano's definition. He says that a guarantee is every student is provided the opportunity to learn a core curriculum, which provides them the probability of success in school. In Missouri, that guarantee are the Missouri Learning Standards. You might remember 10 years ago, we had Common Core standards that quickly came and went. But the goal there for Common Core was this idea of equity and a guarantee across the United States, that we would have these set standards that we know would cause high probability of success in students. And again, it was an equity issue across the United States to kind of ensure that all states were teaching the same thing. Well, we know how Common Core went. It did not go over in many states. And so those that it did not go over with, they adopted their own standards. And so that becomes the guarantee in their state. So this is very important for us to realize, because there's a big misconception going around education in general that our resources, those things we use to teach our standards, are mostly considered our curriculum, when in fact the guarantee that we give is our state standards. So if you are a teacher or a district who has been relying more heavily on a resource rather than focusing on the state standards, that's why we're engaging in this work. True Equity Missouri needs to ensure that every teacher is fully equipped in understanding what the state standards are, and that every student is getting exposed to those. So that's the guarantee. And then the viability part is just that schools give the necessary time available and protect it so students can learn that curriculum, but also we have to have a realistic time frame and pacing guide of how we're actually going to teach those standards. So this slide is really the why behind you're doing the work today. It's essential that we have a pacing guide and a plan of how we could teach our guaranteed and viable curriculum, which is our state standards. You'll be familiar with, you may not have these hard copy in front of you. We'll show you in the management tool that in response to accelerated learning and this idea that teachers have so many things to cover and we need to whittle it down, DESE came up with recommended priority standards that all teachers need to teach. And then they also came and said around 2021, hey, not only will we prioritize these standards, but these new priority standards will drive what's going to be on MAP and EOC assessments. So by 2024, 80 to 90% of what students will be tested on are these new priority standards. So this begs, once this all happened, the question of, well, how are schools going to do this? We have to shift how we're doing the development process. We all feel like this picture on the screen of hamsters in a wheel when it comes to curriculum. And so that's one thing we're trying to stop today, that we're going to give you an easy process to create your guaranteed and viable curriculum that you can hopefully leave and not come back to in a while. So the first thing we're going to be working on is just looking at this idea that we're going to not only be pacing our priority standards, but we're going to be creating a clear and organized tool for your standards. If you look to the right, you'll see the template that looks very similar to yours with a little bit of updates that we'll go over, but it's separated into columns. So you'll read it up and down, that you'll have a unit. Within that unit, you'll see your pacing information that you can put. There's a blank where you can hyperlink assessments. We have all priority standards written in ICANN language and then the actual priority standard. So the goal for this page is not only, again, to have a pacing guide, but that you can see every assessment, every assignment, that we want to be hyperlinked to one place. Many of you in the room have probably engaged at one point or another, even the first year of your career, that you did not have a curriculum, or you couldn't access the curriculum, or you didn't know how to read the curriculum. That is a systemic problem in education that needs to stop. And so we're offering this management tool and this sustainable system. Once we organize this here, anyone to come should be able to go to this one spot and have an idea of what are the key things I should be teaching and where can I find them. We're going to hyperlink all those documents there. So if you tend to be a person who has things saved in a lot of different folders that even you have trouble finding, in this work, you're going to go find those documents, you're going to get those links, and you're going to hyperlink them right here on this tool. So that way it's organized for you and anyone after you. You'll notice on the left that we have a picture of a textbook. This is an important time to realize the connection between your standards and your textbook. We want to help you if you have a resource to look within it, and each unit, you could even make those titles at the top of your template correspond with your textbook. But within each chapter of the textbook, we want you to find what Missouri Priority Standard is taught within it, or what supporting standard. And we're going to help you pace the two so that they work well together. But ultimately, what you'll end up finding is sometimes your resource doesn't cover any priority standards. That's important for you to know. It might adjust your pacing. If you have a unit with no priority standards, up at the top, you're going to want to spend less time. On the other end, you might have a unit that covers a lot of priority standards. So that will impact your pacing and the lessons you do. Keep in mind, the purpose of this will also not only audit your resource as you go through. There will be some standards your resource doesn't cover. You need to know that. There might be supplemental units you need to do, but also it's going to help you become a better consumer of your resource. If you've ever been frustrated that you can't get through every lesson, that's because your resource wasn't intended to do so. Your resource was intended for you to use to teach your standards. So having it paced out in this way, you'll know which lessons you need to focus on and which lessons you could skip. But ultimately, we want it organized into one spot. This next slide is a bit of a close-up. It'll look very similar to the system you have. You'll see in the yellow the priority standards. Notice how sometimes priority standards will run all the way across. And what that means is this is a priority that I would assess for mastery in every unit. If it lies just in one unit, that means it's a priority that I do want to assess in this unit. And you'll notice the pink section mirrors the yellow. All we've done is taken the priority standard and put it in that I can language for you, because you should always be writing on the board or communicating to students in student-friendly language those standards that you're working on. So we just mirror that. And then underneath you have those supporting standards. Those, we are still responsible for teaching all of the MLS, but we want to just make sure that we are assessing the priority. So we've separated those. You can still see the big picture of all the standards and how that would look. If you notice at the very bottom, you'll notice these tabs, and that we also put multiple grade levels on one sheet. That's because we're wanting transparency across grade levels and contents to look for those vertical gaps, but just so that you have access. Your district can change that if you'd like to later, but you'll definitely need to switch on different tabs and make sure you're working on your tab. Here's an example of a social studies template that is somewhat filled out here. You'll notice at the very top, this idea of hyperlinking again, that some key documents from the State Department are hyperlinked there right at the top. So they're easy access. There are some dates that this teacher has written that they would like to use to teach each one of those units. And you'll see toward the end of the document on the right, they've really started embedding more quizzes that they're going to be using. So we're wanting, again, to make this a one-stop shop. I'll show you some more examples of these completed to give you an idea of what they could look like and sound like. So here's how this process is going to be expedited for you. Even though the example on the screen is using some ELA standards, you're going to have these with social studies. You're going to have a tab that has your content, and you'll see listed all the standards. Priorities are already color coded in yellow, and they'll have a corresponding pink section that says I can next to it. So if it's white, that means it's supporting standard. Any priority we have put in yellow and then already typed out the student-friendly language. You can grab that standard and you're just going to be pasting it into this common template your district will be using. So this is what expedites the process, because you can grab your standard and just paste it. Also, if you haven't spent much time in the priority standards, you'll be rereading these a lot, but this is a great activity in helping you really concrete in your mind, what are those priorities and where should they be paced? So that's how it's going to go quickly. So here's what we want to do. We want to start talking about how to pace your priority standards based on when you expect students to be proficient, because eventually you will develop assessment questions around those standards. So before we move into this part, I'm going to ask you to pause the video, go ahead, open up your management tool, and start finding your tabs that have your standards and your template before we dive in to go next. So hopefully you've had time to pull up your management tool. It should look similar to this, where it has some tabs at the bottom, and you should have a standards tab that looks similar to this, and a template tab that you're going to be copying and pasting into. You'll notice up here that Google Sheets is going to be one of the most frustrating things to get used to. So bear with us. We'll show you some tips and tricks, but it's going to be the best in terms of allowing you to link things. But you'll notice if I hover over this line, I can move things around and make it look a little differently. Also, you will notice at the bottom of your tabs a Start Here tab that also has a video that has, and it's at the top here too, some tips and tricks if you have trouble with some technical issues such as merging cells, etc. You'll be able to click on there and it will help you. So one of the most important things to realize about social studies standards is that they have switched to tools of inquiry. So in the past, you have really heavily relied on content skills and having students memorize content. They're now more similar to reading skills because they're thinking tools and inquiry skills. So it's how do you read like a historian, write like a historian, etc. So in your document, whichever course you're looking at, you're going to notice that the tools of inquiry have been highlighted for you. And so here's the good and complicated thing. These tools of inquiry can really almost fit in each one of your units. So it's up for you to decide which tool of inquiry you think best fits in each unit. So let's look at an example. I'm going to come over here to my blank template. If you are, we don't need rhyming and poetry, but if you know that you teach beginning civilizations, go ahead and put in your unit names as you already teach your units. Most of you, unless you're a new teacher, you probably already know specific units that you like to teach. You can clearly see I am not a history teacher, but I'm going to just type some things in here that don't even go in order, okay? But civilizations, early humans, Reconstruction era, whatever you're teaching, go ahead and put the units up there. Now, what you'll notice is that most of the time, those things that were a priority within civilization, which are those content standards of, Mesopotamia, how they settled near the Euphrates, all of those things you might have seen in the past or content as priorities, those are all supporting standards, but those will all live under here. But what you'll need to decide within your civilization unit, if it's easier, you could go through. So let's see if I can find something that I think relates to civilization, and then you can laugh at me in the video when I'm wrong here. We're going to come back here and we're going to find a standard looking through that might deal with culture. So I'm going to Command C or Control C if you're on a PC. I'm going to come back to my template and I am going to paste this idea that origin structures and essential beliefs might be part of the beginning civilization. So you might actually want to start with content standards. And now here's what I can do. Once I know I've covered that standard, I can come up here to the paint can and I can actually change it a different color to make sure I know, because you're also auditing your curriculum as you go, to make sure I know that I've used it. So I'm also going to take this, describe how the worldview of social groups define the position of an individual within society. I also feel like that would go in that unit. So I'm going to copy and paste that there. And again, I'm going to change the standard using my paint can, theoretically, if my computer is going to work, to make sure that I know I've covered it. So once I've got some supporting standards in there, now I'm going to go back and read. These are in the same section, so most likely they are priority standards. Using a world lens, describe how people's perspective shaped the sources and artifacts they created, definitely would fit in that unit. So I'm going to grab that priority and I'm going to come back up here and I'm going to paste it because I want to make sure I know I'm using this as an essential question as a tool for my teaching. But I also need to remember when I'm using a priority standard that I also want to grab that student-friendly language. So I'm going to grab that, come back and paste it up here as well. Okay, when that happens, it did not wrap for you. There's this little button up here, a line with an arrow. I can hit center. Now, if you do not get hung up on format, someone can always help you with that later. And that's what that tips and tricks video is for. But I thought I'd show you while I'm here. And I'm going to go ahead and change the color of this. Not that I can't use it again later, but I want to make sure I know I have used that standard. Examine the origins impact of social structures and stratifications, relationships between people. I also believe that is a priority I would use here. So I'm going to paste that. I'm going to grab the supporting, come back, and here we go. So within this unit of civilization, these are the major tools of inquiry I'm going to be using: written and student-friendly language. Here are my teacher priority standards, and here are all the other contents I'm going to be using. Now you have a choice. You could put other important resources that you'd like to use with this unit here. Some people actually will type in assessments here, or you could put quizzes. You could put hyperlink in your unit plans. Remember, at the end of the day, we want any key documents you use for this unit to be hyperlinked to this sheet, because we want any new person, or just to have it organized for you personally, that everything you need is on this one spot and you remember. And again, you might want to put pacing under here. This is a 3-week unit. So you can add columns. You can click to the right, or excuse me, add rows. I just deleted one, so I'll undo that. You can add rows to things. So here's my int row. You can add important links at the bottom, but at the end of the day, the only thing that you cannot change is the fact that you have priorities in student and teacher language and supporting. But anything else in this template, you can add rows and kind of add your own dynamic to it. Let's look at a couple of priority standards, or excuse me, curriculum management tools that are already completed. So you'll notice this particular one, how to on history, it's 3 weeks. They've got some things hyperlinked here, some MOLEAT blocks, which I would highly recommend. That would be step 2 on here to look at. There's lots of great ones for social studies. They've hyperlinked all those specific ones on here. They've also hyperlinked in their resource that, hey, I'm going to do modules 1 through 3 here. Here's my quick link to get it. This is quite a few tools of inquiry that they're using. Here's their priority standards, and at the bottom, they've even put some important links too. But look, there's a lot of content, but keep in mind, again, with social studies, your goal is that kids have the tools, the thinking skills they need to find the information. We're not having them memorize as much information. And again, with these MOLEAT blocks, that will be hyperlinked at the top of your templates. Let me find it here where it says MOLEAT blocks. You want to go there at some point, because these samples are what they have done. These questions were created by Missouri work groups, and they use the tools of inquiry and are a really good anchor to you if there was to be a MAP or EOC in your grade level, the types of proficiency questions that they would want students to be able to answer. So once you get your standards paced, these are just great resources, the MOLEAT blocks, to then find specific ones that go with your unit and put them there. One other resource for social studies I want you to know about, and I'm going to type it in here so you can see it, the Stanford Educational History Group, SHEG, Stanford Education History Group. Click on there. This is another amazing site when we think about the shift from content to historical thinking. It talks about reading like a historian, writing like a historian. It has specific lessons. It has history assessments that you can use, that you can look through. So their historical thinkings, they say, are through contextualization, sourcing, collaboration, the use of evidence, and periodization. That's not exactly the same wording as Missouri standards, but they're very similar. But they are they have a lot of great videos and great lessons. So after you fill out your sheet, you could definitely come back to the MOLEAT blocks and the Stanford History Education Group and hyperlink great resources into there, because there is this shift in your teaching, if you haven't made it, about teaching more tools of inquiry and thinking. So at this point, I hope you're ready to go. You just need time to dive into your management tool to practice toggling back and forth from your, oops, let me go over here, from your standards tab into your template tab. But your next step, I want you to go ahead and open up your management tool and see, are you able to type in those units? Do you know which units you already teach? Or if you need some help with that, remember, you can use your textbook and go in the order of the units that they suggest, and that's fine, because it's going to be more about the tools of inquiry, which can be used with any type of content. So at this point, I'd like you to pause the video and spend a few moments until you're ready to do a summary of your work, but go ahead and dive in and see if you can get some unit names in there. At this time, I hope that you are heavily into work time and that this is starting to make a little bit more sense. Please make sure to ask the facilitators or partners around you, or if you're still working with our company, we probably have some feedback time set up for you that we can look at your tools. Please just make sure you have time to talk with a partner or get feedback as you go through this process to make sure you feel good about it. I tried to show you a few examples. Keep in mind, it's up to you on how you organize your tools, but we just want them to be about tools of inquiry. After you get all of your standards in, that's when you'll go back and link. So we thank you for your time today, and I hope this video was helpful in getting you started with your management tool. If you would like to stay up on key updates, this is just a link to our network for you to do that. Thank you, and we hope that this was a more pleasant and quicker curriculum process. And thank you for all the work you do for our students.